Emma had no idea what to expect when she came home that Friday evening. The week had been long and tiring, filled with the usual routine of work, errands, and quiet dinners. Jake, her husband, had seemed distant lately, more distracted, less himself. They barely talked during the week, and when they did, it felt like they were skimming the surface of something deeper that neither wanted to dive into. Emma hoped that tonight would be different, that maybe Jake would finally open up as she stepped through the front door. She noticed the soft glow of the living room lights and the faint sound of laughter. Curiosity pulled her forward. When she walked into the room, Jake was there, but he wasn't alone. His 3 closest friends stood around, smiling, holding drinks, and chatting as if this was some long-planned gathering. Emma was surprised. She hadn't expected anyone tonight, especially not a surprise party or get-together. Jake caught her eye and smiled, though something in his expression was unreadable. "Hey, Em," he said softly. "We wanted to surprise you." His friends nodded, offering warm greetings. Emma forced a smile, but felt a flicker of unease. This wasn't the kind of surprise she was ready for, not yet. The friends tried to make conversation, telling stories and jokes that made Jake laugh more openly than Emma had heard in weeks. The room felt warm and alive, but Emma's heart beat faster. Why now? Why with his friends? She couldn't shake the feeling that this night was the start of something she didn't understand yet. As the evening went on, Jake pulled Emma aside. "I know I've been distant," he admitted quietly. "There's been stuff I haven't said. Things I thought I could handle alone." His eyes searched hers for a reaction, but Emma was still trying to process everything. "Tonight is about being honest," he said. "With you, with them, with myself." Emma nodded, the tension easing slightly, but still thick in the air. She wanted to believe him, to believe this surprise was a step toward something real. But a quiet voice in her mind whispered doubts, memories of late nights when Jake came home late without explanation. The feeling of being alone even when he was in the same room. One of Jake's friends, Tom, pulled Emma into a side conversation, sharing a story about Jake's struggles at work and how his friends had been there to support him. Their loyalty surprised Emma. She hadn't realized how much Jake had been leaning on them. It was clear this group had been through a lot together, but Emma felt like she had been left on the outside as the night grew deeper. The friends began to share more personal stories. Jake's friend Mike hesitated, then spoke about trust and mistakes, about moments when choices hurt those closest to them. Emma felt her stomach tighten. Was this just small talk, or was there something more beneath the surface? Jake looked at her again, his expression open but serious. "I needed them tonight, and I need you too." His voice was steady, but there was a vulnerability Emma hadn't seen before. The laughter in the room softened, replaced by a quiet that made every word hang in the air. Emma realized this surprise wasn't just a party. It was a moment Jake had crafted to bring everything out into the open, to face whatever was hidden between them. But the truth felt heavy, like a secret waiting to break free. The evening ended with promises to talk more, to be honest even when it hurt. Jake's friends left slowly, giving Emma and Jake a moment alone. The silence between them was different, now charged with possibility but shadowed by uncertainty. Emma stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker outside. She wondered how much she really knew about the man she married and how much she was willing to fight to keep what they had. The surprise had changed everything, but she didn't yet know how. That night, Emma lay awake, thoughts swirling. The surprise wasn't just about friends and laughter. It was about unspoken truths finally coming to light. Tomorrow would bring new questions and maybe answers too. But for now, all she could do was wait. The next morning, Emma woke with a heavy feeling in her chest. Last night's surprise still lingered in her mind, not just the unexpected gathering, but the quiet moments between Jake and his friends and the weight behind their words. She knew there was more to the story, something Jake wasn't ready to say out loud yet. She hoped today would bring clarity. Jake was already awake when she came downstairs. He looked tired but determined, like he had made a decision. The usual warmth between them felt fragile, stretched thin by the secrets hanging in the air. Emma sat down at the kitchen table and Jake joined her, his eyes searching hers. I want to tell you everything, Jake said quietly. I owe you that. Emma nodded, ready to listen. Jake took a deep breath and began. He told her about the struggles he'd been hiding, the pressure at work, the fear of failing as a husband and a provider. He confessed that some of the distance she felt wasn't just stress, but his way of protecting her from his own mistakes. He hesitated, then revealed that he had made a terrible choice. During a particularly hard week when everything felt like it was falling apart, he had turned to someone else for comfort. It was a moment of weakness, a brief connection with someone who didn't know the real him. The guilt had eaten at him every day since. Emma felt a sharp pain but forced herself to stay calm. Jake's honesty was painful, but it was the first step she needed. She wanted to understand, to see if there was a way forward. Jake explained that the surprise last night was part of his way to be accountable. He invited his friends because they had been witnesses to his mistakes and his efforts to change. They had stood by him, encouraging him to face the truth and rebuild trust. He hoped Emma would see that he wasn't running away from what he had done. The room felt heavy with emotion as Jake spoke. Emma struggled with conflicting feelings, hurt, anger, but also a flicker of hope. She loved Jake deeply, and she knew forgiveness wasn't easy. But maybe it was possible. Later that day, Emma met with one of Jake's friends, Mark, who had been part of the surprise gathering. Mark shared how Jake had opened up to them, how much he regretted hurting Emma, and how committed he was to making things right. Hearing it from someone else made Emma feel less alone in this painful moment. As the day went on, Emma and Jake began to talk more openly. They revisited old memories, both good and bad, trying to find the cracks that had allowed distance to grow between them. There were tears, apologies, and moments of silence where nothing needed to be said. Emma realized that infidelity wasn't just about a single act. It was about the loneliness and misunderstandings that had built up over time. Both of them had contributed to the walls between them, and breaking those down would take time and patience. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She thought about the surprise, the confession, and the fragile hope that maybe their marriage could survive this. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but she knew the truth had finally come to light. And sometimes, the hardest truths were the ones that could save a relationship. Emma decided she was willing to try for herself, for Jake, and for the love they once shared. But she also knew that forgiveness wasn't a promise. It was a journey they had to walk together, step by step. The days that followed were some of the hardest Emma had ever faced. The shock of Jake's confession still weighed heavily on her heart. But beneath that weight was a growing desire to understand not just his actions, but what had been missing between them. The silence that once filled their home now gave way to long, honest conversations. Neither of them shied away from the difficult questions. Though the answers weren't always easy to hear, Jake was open about his regrets. He spoke about how loneliness and pressure had clouded his judgment, how he'd felt trapped in a version of himself he didn't recognize. Emma listened, her own feelings shifting between anger, sadness, and a fragile hope. She wasn't sure if she could fully trust him yet, but his honesty sparked something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of connection. One afternoon, Emma found herself sitting on the porch, the warm sun casting soft light on her face. Jake joined her quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. They sat side by side, shoulders almost touching, but not quite. For a while, neither spoke. The comfort of simply being together was new, yet strangely familiar. I'm scared, Emma finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Scared that things will never be the same, that I'll always carry this hurt. Jake reached out, gently taking her hand. I'm scared too, he said, but I want to try to be better for you. For us, the vulnerability between them was raw and real. It wasn't the grand gestures or dramatic moments that would heal their wounds, but these quiet, honest exchanges. They began to rebuild piece by piece, learning how to trust again. Yet the road wasn't without its challenges. Old fears surfaced unexpectedly. Emma would catch herself doubting, wondering if Jake's promises were enough. Jake struggled with guilt, sometimes retreating into silence when he felt overwhelmed. But through it all, they kept returning to each other, refusing to give up. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake surprised Emma with a simple dinner at their favorite local spot. The cozy restaurant was filled with soft music and the smell of fresh bread. They talked about dreams they'd once shared and new hopes they could create together. Emma realized that while their marriage had been shaken, it wasn't broken. There was still love beneath the pain of foundation, waiting to be rebuilt stronger than before. She saw in Jake's eyes a determination that matched her own, a promise to fight for what they had. In the quiet moments after dinner, they walked hand in hand through the streets of their small town, the cool night air wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. The surprise that had started it all now seemed like a turning point, a painful but necessary moment. That forced them to face their truth. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where honesty and patience would guide them forward. Though the scars remained, Emma and Jake were learning to carry them together, not as burdens, but as reminders of how far they'd come. Their story was no longer just about infidelity or mistakes. It was about healing, forgiveness, and the quiet strength found in love's second chance. As they walked back home, the stars twinkling overhead, Emma squeezed Jake's hand gently. "We're not perfect," she said softly, "but maybe that's okay." Jake smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. Maybe it is. Weeks passed since Jake's confession, and life began to settle into a new rhythm for Emma and him. The air between them was lighter, though the journey was far from over. Both understood that healing was a process, a series of small steps rather than giant leaps. Emma had accepted that forgiveness wasn't immediate, was something she needed time to give. And Jake knew patience was his greatest task. They spent many evenings talking, sometimes late into the night, sharing feelings they had kept buried for years. Jake opened up about his fears, not just of losing Emma, but of being vulnerable in ways he never had before. Emma shared her own pain and confusion, admitting that trust was fragile and had to be earned day by day. These conversations weren't easy, but they built a bridge between them that hadn't existed before. One afternoon, Emma suggested they attend couples counseling. Jake agreed without hesitation. The sessions were tough, sometimes bringing tears, sometimes frustration, but they became a safe place to face the wounds, honestly. The counselor helped them see patterns they hadn't noticed and encouraged them to find new ways to support each other. Outside the sessions, Jake made a real effort to show Emma how committed he was to their marriage. He started small, bringing her coffee in the morning, leaving notes with kind words, taking time off work to be present. Emma noticed these gestures and felt warmth growing in her heart. It wasn't about grand declarations, but steady, genuine actions. One weekend, they decided to take a short trip to the countryside, away from the distractions of daily life. The quiet days among nature gave them space to reconnect. They walked through forests, shared meals by the fireplace, and laughed in ways that felt like old times. The distance from their usual surroundings helped both see their relationship from a fresh perspective. Emma found herself thinking about this surprise night again the moment Jake had invited his friends over. At the time it had felt overwhelming, confusing, but now she understood it differently. That night wasn't just about a surprise party. It was Jake's way of showing her that he wasn't alone and that he wanted her to be part of his world again. It was an invitation to rebuild not just their marriage, but the trust and friendship beneath it. Even with progress, challenges remained. Some days, old fears crept back. Emma sometimes questioned if she could fully move past the betrayal, and Jake sometimes doubted if he could truly make up for what had happened. But instead of shutting down, they chose to talk openly, reminding each other of their commitment. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset from their porch, Jake took Emma's hand. "Thank you for staying," he said softly, "for believing in us even when it was hard." Emma smiled, feeling a mix of relief and hope. "I'm still scared," she admitted, "but I'm willing to try, to trust again." That night, as they went to bed, Emma felt a quiet peace she hadn't known in months. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time it felt possible to walk it together. Their story was no longer defined by mistakes or pain, but by the courage it took to face those mistakes and the love that held them through. They were building something new, fragile but real, imperfect but theirs. Emma and Jake knew there would be more ups and downs, but they had learned that honesty, patience, and forgiveness were the strongest foundations. And with that, they were ready to face whatever came next together.